Good afternoon, everybody. We're in the home stretch, I think. I knew all the way back in 1998 that social technology was going to be a really big deal. What I didn't know was that not everyone had come to the same conclusion as I had. I discovered this when I was kicked out of high school for building a website for the Gay Straight Alliance. A club that I discovered was forbidden. All I'd wanted to do was connect people through this amazing new platform that I discovered called the web, and instead I got kicked out of school. Turned out my high school was not exactly the best place to become an entrepreneur in social technology. Fast forward to 2004, and I found myself in San Francisco. I ended up finding a group of friends that were interested in the future, in social technology, in working on connecting people together, just like me. Some of those friends would end up going on to build technologies and platforms that would become household names, from WordPress to Flickr to Twitter, Instagram, and Slack. My own contribution to the era that became later known as Web 2.0 was, of course, the humble hashtag, which originally was rejected by Twitter as being something that was too nerdy to ever work. And yet it's hard to argue that the hashtag hasn't had a huge impact on how people find and connect to each other through social media today. In fact, as of now, there are at least over 200 million hashtags that are used per day, or put another way, 2,300 hashtags that are created every second. And that's just on Twitter. That doesn't count Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, or any other social media platforms. The hashtag has given rise to movements like the Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and one that I just discovered yesterday, Fridays for Future. The products that we started to build in 2004 are now used by billions of people all over the world. And I was there at the beginning. But it's impossible to not look at the success that we achieved and not also consider some of the negative consequences that social technology and smartphones in particular have caused. Now, some of the issues are a result of translating complex human behaviors and interactions into their digital equivalents. Like, for example, the humble like button. Now, it's easy to imagine creating a button that allows you to express that you like something, right? That's kind of what this is for. But when placed in a commercial context, the meaning becomes a little less clear. When you like this, is that you're saying that you have an affinity for this, or that you want to receive updates from this page? Are you demonstrating who you are to your friends and family? Or are you simply, again, gesturing towards something that you like? This kind of confusion abounds in all of our social apps. And of course, with the addition of stickers like emojis and GIFs, it can be challenging to know exactly what people are trying to convey. Just consider, for example, how the same emoji appears across a number of different phone companies' devices. But it's not like we're not trying. Like, we're really trying to communicate through these platforms. And yet, because we must translate complex human thoughts into a form that a computer can understand, and then translate what we've said to it to somebody else, there's a lot that's often lost in translation. And so what can be meant as a joke can come off as mean, or a casual reply can be easily misinterpreted. You compound this over time, and in a race to connect everybody on the planet, we're now having to cope with a constant barrage of messages, notifications, and updates, which means that all digital communication has become cheaper. And we're really just starting to understand that too much social media is bad for us. It's having a negative impact on our emotions, on our physical health, and on our interpersonal relationships. Connection was a worthy goal, to be sure, but it was insufficient. What we really crave is social technology that supports not merely connection, but also comfort and security. Without comfort and security, primates become emotionally stunted and develop antisocial and abusive behaviors, just like the baby rhesus monkeys in Harry Harlow's famous experiments from the 1950s. Harlow showed that even when wire surrogate mothers provided food. These baby monkeys would prefer to spend time nestled in cloth-covered surrogates, oftentimes for up to 13 to 15 hours a day, even though their source of food was the other surrogate. In our context, our smartphones have essentially taken the place of Harlow's wire surrogate mothers. And they manipulate us into believing that we're getting comfort and security, but it's not real. And just like Harlow's baby monkeys, when we spend too much time with our phones, we develop antisocial behaviors like bullying, aggression, and depression. I think Esther Perel actually put it really well when she observed that people go to bed with their phones in all senses of the word. The last thing they stroke is their phone. The first thing they stroke is their phone. I can't imagine that doesn't have an effect. These devices have transformed the rich tapestry of human connection beyond recognition. And so the challenge for social technology designers is not to replace our phones, but to augment our technology to support pro-social behaviors through things like self-awareness and introspection, by creating opportunities to feel real empathy, and to drive richer and more meaningful interactions between people. As a founder, building a product is one way to support this type of change. But in order to scale this change, we must change the culture that surrounds founders. Since I was there at the beginning of the first social technology wave, and as a founder myself, I know how much cultural context affects the way that we solve problems, the way that we even understand problems. Culture affects founders. And founders, just like artists, reflect themselves in their products. Products, therefore, reflect the founder's cultural context, and through their design choices, can influence users' behaviors. And therefore, users can take on aspects of the founder's culture. So as the founder's products become more widely adopted, like Facebook and Twitter, that founder culture can shift culture as a whole, simply by changing users' behaviors that are downstream. Take, for example, Twitter. The idea came to Jack Dorsey because he was a bike messenger and wanted an easy way to relay deals to his friends. But Jack Dorsey was also a political activist. He realized that SMS could be useful to share status updates of what he was doing. But from the beginning, Twitter also adopted a very liberal policy in terms of what could be shared, almost taking an absolutist approach to free speech. This is one of the reasons why Twitter has really struggled in recent years with controversial actors like Alex Jones, because of that core value and that culture of free speech. And so as Twitter has become more popular, it's changed culture at large, primarily in how we think and how we talk. Now, this is not a new insight. This is something that a contemporary to Marshall McLuhan, John Culkin, talked about in 1967 when he said that we shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. And so it's no wonder that we become more anxious, more disconnected, and less able to have deep, meaningful, and calm conversations, thanks to the chirpy design of products like Twitter. But I don't blame the technology of Twitter specifically. It is also the culture that produced Jack and me and my friends. McLuhan told us that the medium is the massage, or the message. And the message of social technology is that it can't be understood separately from the culture that produces it. So if we change the culture of founders, it's my belief that we can change the nature of social technology products. If we can create a culture of emotional intelligence and empathy earlier in the process, earlier in the lives of the next generation of founders and creators, the people who are creating the next Twitters and Instagrams, then I think that we have a chance to make a real change. And it's already starting to happen. Even Instagram is starting to explore new ways of creating pro-social behaviors in their app. We need to inspire a culture of emotionally intelligent entrepreneurship, or popularize what Professor Scott Galloway calls wokeness as a business strategy. He was recently on the Pivot podcast with Kara Swisher and observed that progressives are capturing the majority of income. And so there's a very smart business strategy in promoting being very open about your progressive values. And by the way, this is the definition of wokeness for those of you just tuning in. Now, I propose that we do this by focusing on 3 specific contexts. One is focusing on the development of the individual and their relationship to themselves. Second is in how people conduct and have human-to-human relationships. Seems pretty obvious. And third is in thinking about different opportunities for enriching relationships between humans and machines. Now, the good news is there's people who are already working on these problems. First, I want to introduce you to Kari and Lisa Solins, who created Atlas to support the mental fitness and emotional wellness of founders. They offer retreats, resources, and an extended support network of investors who believe in the emotional well-being of the founders that they support. They are focused on those investors who understand that the startup game is a marathon and not a sprint, and that those investors can see that when the emotional fitness of their founders is ignored, those companies often fail. And so Atlas is working to change the culture of founders to help them become more emotionally resilient by creating a context in which being vulnerable and asking for help has been destigmatized. And this is a context for people who are supposed to always are supposed to magically have all of the answers. Ross Ingram and Christina Poindexter are building Maslow, which is an AI companion that inspires pro-social behaviors in humans by expressing empathy through nonverbal cues. What does that mean? Well, this is Maslow, which is an emotive orb that emits essentially facial, or that emits, that mirrors emotional states, rather, in humans by reading facial expressions, by looking at voice recognition and modulating other social data. Here's Maslow expressing joy. Here's Maslow being amused. And this is Maslow expressing surprise. Now, this is the kind of emotional technology that could be added to voice assistants in different markets to enhance human-to-machine relationships. These examples represent a new class of emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs that are creating a new wave of what I hope are human-nourishing social technology startups. And we have to pursue this path with greater urgency. It took us 30 years to connect 50% of the world's population to the internet. According to the UN, it's going to take only 10 more years to connect the last half. And so if we want the future of social technology to be different than it is today, we do have our work cut out for us. Put it this way, 10 years ago, Instagram didn't even exist, and now it has over 1 billion users. Just imagine how many more Instagrams are going to be created between now and 2030. And consider that the impact of those new Instagrams are going to have an enormous impact on the human societies that are just getting online for the first time, represented in light blue on this map. The founders of those future Instagrams need to be culturally aligned with Kari, Lisa, Ross, and Christina. And we have to get this right. And we will if we start now. Now, you remember when I told you at the beginning of my talk that I was kicked out of high school all the way back in '98? Well, when I reflect on the person who I was then and the person who I have become and my journey, if I could go back and have a conversation with myself or with the people around me, I'd obviously encourage my interest in technology, design, and computers. But I'd also encourage myself to really think about developing the technology of myself, my ability to know myself, to be curious, to follow my intuition, to think about others, to express empathy. And what I'm saying today, I hope, is specifically relevant to young people who might despair about the future or are wondering what is going to happen next, especially those of you who use hashtags every day and never thought for a moment that someone no different than you could contribute an idea like that to social media. Now, I started my journey in social technology quite a while ago, but you guys have grown up in social media, and so you are in the best position to change it. So if you don't like the way that social media makes you feel, you don't like the way that you see people treat each other on social media, you are the ones that can change it by developing the technology of yourselves. Once you've done that, then I encourage you to go and build the next Instagram, the next Twitter, the next Snapchat, or Facebook, or ideally something even way better than those. So that your products then help the rest of us become the technology of better humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Very interesting, and I think the audience felt the same. So they have prepared some questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
We're going to start with the first one. How can we promote, encourage pro-social behavior?
I mean, it probably helps to define a little bit about what pro-social behavior is. I use this term, obviously, as the opposite of antisocial. And I think pro-social is really about being able to, one, sort of know yourself, know what your needs are. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we are actually not resourced. We're tired, we're hungry, and someone comes to us looking for support, or even like someone will send us a message that sounds cranky or something, and we respond immediately. I think promoting and encouraging pro-social behavior is about, one, checking in with yourself, knowing where you're at, so that you can actually support other people in a way that actually creates more connection, more understanding, more familiarity than the alternative.
Mm-hmm. And do you think we should start educating kids about social media? I guess we do already, but probably more.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I find challenging about educating kids about social media and the use is like they find very subtle ways to use it, ways in which, as adults or even as people who are influencing their use won't even understand. I mean, for example, like I know TikTok is sort of like a trendy thing, and I don't use it. I don't fully understand it, but a lot of like teenagers do, and yet there's a lot of bullying that goes on. I don't think that it's sufficient just to educate people about social media. Again, I think you really have to create a sense of stability and centeredness in a person so that if they are bullied, they're able to respond to it in a way that doesn't risk causing them going deeper into the spiral of the stuff that happens there. I mean, I will say, so one of the funny things is that my username is Chris on Instagram, which is a blessing and a curse. But what it means is that a lot of teenagers and kids in high school will add me to groups because they don't know how usernames work. And I will end up hearing about all these conversations that they have where they are bullying each other or being mean. And in some cases, I've actually seen people call each other out and say, hey, actually, that's not very nice. That's not a good way to do it. But those types of conversations could be completely hidden to parents, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't think, again, education about social media is sufficient if you aren't also encouraging the individual to become more responsible and resilient.
And respectful?
And respectful, exactly,
I mean,
in those contexts.
It's a basic thing, right? And where do you see social media going in 10 years? We had a similar question for Philip Justus with YouTube. I think it's a very difficult one, but who knows? Maybe you have an answer.
I mean, I think what I've been looking at in terms of the future of social media is one, how do we express ourselves in a way that has greater fidelity? And I wouldn't even say like authenticity or honesty, because what I've been looking a lot at is ways in which, for example, virtual or digital influencers, like we talked about digital avatars yesterday, are possibly providing new ways of creating a separation between who we are in the real world and how we can represent or play with identities in the digital realm. And I think there's lots of possibilities in there to try out and to learn who we are in the digital space with less risk. And so I'm hoping that more of those technologies will encourage that type of thing.
I think we have one really burning question. How do we incentivize larger companies, particularly social media, to optimize for things other than clicks and time in their apps? I think that's a good one.
That is an amazing question. That is sort of at the fundamental, I think, foundational aspect of the crisis around social media. A friend of mine, Tristan Harris, has created something called the Center for Humane Technology. And ultimately, capitalism and that type of competitive context creates sort of, as he calls it, a race to the bottom of the brainstem in order to profit from our attention. I honestly feel like it's going to be a next generation that grows up that decides to operate under a different set of economic outcomes because they look at us, or they look at adults, or they look at how social media is causing people to treat each other. And it'll be like the green movement, essentially, where it's like, we can't keep doing this to ourselves, even though we have this amazing technology. So it really has to be a choice to step outside of the norms of the capitalist system to create a different set of incentives that, again, promote a different set of outcomes. I honestly don't know, because I've been thinking about it for a long time. I've been in Silicon Valley, and the whole structure is set around that, and so I haven't figured it out just yet.
What was the first hashtag you have used?
Well, again, it's very nerdy. It was Barcamp.
Barcamp.
Barcamp, B-A-R-C-A-M-P. Actually, there was a bar camp here in Berlin in, I think, 2006, and I was here, 2007, when I was here for that. And it was an event. It was an unconference. It was an event that I organized and brought a bunch of my geeks and nerdy friends together with.
So it's a legendary hashtag.
It is a legendary hashtag, yes.
Thank you so much
Awesome. Thank you.
for having us.
Thanks.
And have a great day.
Thank you.